The TrekWorks YouTube channel is sponsored by Tenant Controls, makers of lighting kits, soundboards, and more. Tenant Controls brings your models to life. Hi there again, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of our Jason and the Argonauts diorama build-up. Boyd here with you. Well, I've been working on this quite a bit, and since the last video I've got the base completed. I've got all the little details added onto that I wanted to do. I also have the Jason figure painted. I was going to shoot some video of painting him, but I wound up painting him by hand, and it just got to be so tedious and time-consuming and everything. The video would have lasted like 3 or 4 hours long, and then I was going back and forth. I struggled a little bit on that, trying to get the flesh tones and everything the way I liked it, so I kind of went on it a little bit and then wiped it back off and started all over again, and just kind of went going back and forth until I was finally happy with it. Like I said in the beginning of this, I'm pretty new to painting human figures, so it took a little while to get to where I wanted to be. But I've also got all the other skeleton figures assembled, and this is our last one here. I'm going to be going with 5 of the skeletons in the display. The reason for that is that the display, if you were to install all 7 of the skeletons that come with this kit, it's going to start looking really, really crowded on the display. Now, the picture that they have of the kit itself, fully assembled here, get it so it's not glaring, but they show all 7 of the skeletons on here. But I think that one of two things: either the skeletons that they used here are smaller, or the base was bigger, because when I lay them all out on the base, on my base and everything that I have here, and have all 7 of these skeletons, there's not nearly enough room as what you see here. They'd be all like really crammed together, and to me, if you start looking at the details of the model and everything once it's finished, if everything's too crammed in there, it gets too busy, if you want to say that. You really can't focus on any of the details. It looks just like a jumbled up mess. So as I said, I'm going to leave out 2 of the skeleton figures, and I'll save them for later. They could come in handy for some other kind of build. But we're still going to have plenty of action going on here. Also in the movie, in the scene where Jason is fighting the skeletons by himself on top of the structure here, there's only like 4 of them fighting him at that time. The rest of them are chasing off, chasing and fighting the rest of his men. And it's not until the very end when he, kind of runs towards the cliff, when all the skeletons are chasing him. So it's a completely different scene. So even this scene here is not completely accurate to the movie. So anyway, we can take a little bit of liberty with that. So what I've got here is I've got the final skeleton. I've built him. I've got him posed the way I want to. This last guy, he's going to be kind of like stepping up onto the, trying to step up onto the platform, and he's staring at Jason. The thing that I had to do with this is, when I set up all these skeletons, and we'll show you here in just a little bit when we show the entire base with all these guys in place, you have to not only get their poses right and everything, but you have to make sure that they're all looking in the same direction, looking at Jason. That's their goal, that's their target. If they're kind of staring in different directions, it doesn't really make any sense. So it took a lot of time to line everything up and all that. But as far as building the skeletons go, the first one that I did, again, having never built any metal figures, these are actually sort of made out of a metal, kind of a pewter kind of, metal, kind of almost like lead, but it doesn't bend quite as easy as lead. You can only bend these joints so far. They come bent a little bit, and you can make up a little bit of difference, but they don't want to bend very well at the joints at all. You wind up bending them a little bit in the in the forearm or the upper arm here, or the the femur or the lower bone, whatever you call this down here, and it doesn't look right. So you can't bend them very far, so you're kind of limited. But you can put their hands and their, you can position the arms and the legs and the sockets here any way you want, and that kind of makes up the difference. So you can get some pretty good poses out of these guys. The spine here is kind of, they're all curved the same way. They're kind of all looking to the left or leaning to the left a little bit. So you have to work with that a little bit too. But you can mount their head in a lot of different directions, looking up or down or left to right. So I was able to work with that. And then their feet, you got to get those set the right way and everything. But talking about putting these together, the first one that I did, I took a little bit of solid copper wire because I wanted to, some of the people out there suggested, pinning these things. So I did that on the first one. I actually drilled little holes in the leg and in the pelvis sockets here and up here on the shoulders and the arm. Well, that was really, really tedious and really time consuming to do because you've got such a tiny little contact point there. It was I just barely was able to pull it off. Even with my smallest drill bit, which I have some really small bits, I was barely able to have a spot to drill. So I thought, in the second one or moving forward after that, I'm going to try to come up with something better. But I pinned that first one together, then I used CA glue and glued them all in place, and he's pretty solid and all that. But so what I wound up doing on the rest of these is I just used regular CA glue. I made sure I took my little grinding tool, my little knurling tool, and I just kind of grinded a little bit in each one of the sockets to make sure that there was no junk in there, and there was really nice clean metal to work with, something good to bond to. And then I CA glued these all in place. Now it's important that you use something that sets up really quickly because you're setting up this pose. What I did is I worked from the ground up. I worked from the feet. I got the feet where I wanted them first, and then I worked up from there to get the stance that I wanted on each one of them. And then figured out what I wanted to do with the arms in the end. And then the head was a simple matter of, once I got this figure in place on the base, I just turned the head to make sure it was going to be looking at Jason, and that was it. So the CA glue seemed like it was going to be pretty strong, but just to take it to an extra level, what I did is I took some JB Weld. It's a two-part epoxy that's made for gluing all kinds of stuff together, and it works exceptionally well on metal. And so what I did is I CA glued all this together, and then made sure it was drying for a little while, and then I just took a little toothpick. I mixed up my little puddle of JB Weld. I took a little toothpick and I just went around all the all the joints on his shoulders, on his hips, and on his feet down here. That was kind of the main load-bearing area. You didn't have to do too much on the head. The CA glue seemed to hold that just fine. But so that stuff takes a good 24 hours for it to cure. But once it does, it's like really, really strong. So these things are plenty strong now, and they're not going to get moved around too much either. Once I mount them on the base, and then I was going to pin them on the base too, but the areas that you can drill on here are really, really small and everything, and you got to worry about breaking them apart when you're trying to drill and everything. So I just JB welded these things down onto the base because I'm never going to move them around or anything, and they're on there good and solid. So this last guy here, we're going to finish. What we're going to do with him now for the camera for you is we're going to do our painting on him, but he's pretty much all ready to go. Once we get him all painted and everything, we'll attach his final little accessories here. We got to attach his sword, and we got to attach his shield, which I've got the shield over here all painted up and ready to go. They've all got their own individual shields. These are really cool. Now I mentioned earlier too that on these these came as paper, just printed on regular paper, and I was going to send these out to my friend Jerry at HTA Model Works. But I thought, you know what, I think I can work with these because this surface here is not really curved that much. And so what I did to protect the paper, because I was going to have to glue these down, and I was worried about the glue, whatever kind of glue I use, soaking into this somehow and maybe making the ink on these things run, is I coated them with some of my, I have some clear lacquer, clear coat. And I just clear coated the front and the back side of the pieces of paper, sprayed it right over these decals. I put about these prints, and I sprayed about 2 or 3 coats on those on both sides, and then let it dry so we formed like a nice little seal on that. And that way, when I glued it on the back, the glue wasn't going to soak through and bother anything. And then I just brushed on some regular Elmer's glue on the back side of these and stuck them down, and just kind of went around with my finger a few times and got them all to stick down. And once I finished with that, I let it dry for a little while. Then I came back and I brushed on another coat of Future over top of this, the regular Future clear coat, and kind of sealed it all up, and so now it's good to go. And his sword here, we've got the shank painted gold here, and then once we once I glue it on onto his hand here, then I'll go ahead and just finish hand painting the rest of the sword. We've done these in sort of an off silver. And so we're ready to go here with the final part, and this is about a 3 or 4 step process here. You can see I primed this guy first, and then I went back and painted him entirely black. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of a dry brush on this guy right now with some ivory white. I've got just a standard old cheap flat brush here. I'm just going to wipe my excess paint off, and I'm just going to start going around him. I like to start on the rib area first here, and we're just going to highlight over the tops of these ribs, so we don't get in those those recessed areas and ruin our black that we got in there. We want that to look black. But I'm just going to go over it, keep my brush flat. If we get a little bit in there, it's not a big deal. We're gonna, after we get all this painted and some of our colors put on here, we're going to go back and we're going to do a little bit of a black wash on this guy too. So not to worry if we get a little bit in there. And I'm just going to go over his entire body. This is the regular ivory white Ceram Coat, Delta Ceram Coat ivory white, which is a nice color to use on this. A pure white looks too bright. Ivory white's a nice, bone-looking color. You can see I'm just kind of highlighting his spine and his scapula bones here. Not worried about a perfect paint job. I'm going to go over his entire skull here. This stuff covers reasonably well. Kind of slow drying, but it works pretty good. Just going to take my time here and go over it. I want to avoid the eye sockets and the nose. We want that to, be left kind of recessed there, and that so it shows up in black. But around his teeth and his jaw and all that, we want to highlight all that. Get him painted nice and evenly here. And so what I was saying is that we're going to be doing like a multi-color paint job on this guy. We're going to start off with our ivory white here, and then we're going to come on down and do a little bit of this sort of medium tan color, which really makes these look great, because these guys were supposed to be in the ground for a long time. They were they're undead soldiers that were brought back from the grave to try to kill Jason and his men by the evil sorcerer in the movie. And so you want them to look like they've been, they're really starting to get pretty rotten. They're just about ready to disintegrate. But looking at the miniatures from the film, which I have a really nice DVD called the Ray Harryhausen Chronicles, and it's a great DVD, by the way, if you're a fan of Ray Harryhausen, because they go into a lot of detail about Ray's career, and Ray's in it himself, talking about his whole experience. And the beautiful part of it is that it's narrated by Leonard Nimoy too, which is really cool, and who happened to be a big fan of Ray Harryhausen. But Ray actually had several of the original stop motion puppets in his own personal collection still from all the movies he'd made, and he shows them during the program, where you see the most of the figures from the Clash of the Titans, the Medusa. I forgot the guy's name. The kind of the main bad guy that kind of looks like the devil guy. A lot of the different monsters from his movies. The Cyclops from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. I'm trying to think of what else they show. The woolly mammoth from one of his movies, the saber-toothed tiger. I mean, all kinds of cool stuff. And they showed the skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts. He still had some of those. And so you get a really good, clear look at them, and you can see that they're multiple colored. They have brown on there. They have white. They have all these different colors. So that's what we're doing here. Whoop! I knocked his hand off. I guess that wasn't glued too good, guys. We'll fix that. I just barely glued that on there to kind of test its position, so that's all right. We'll fix that. The rest of them here is really solid. I haven't had any trouble at all. Once I got them, the joints on their legs and everything put together, that worked out pretty good. The legs were the most important part. That's what's supporting all the weight and everything. So Just kind of making sure we get in the nooks and crannies here. We want to get inside of his rib cage a little bit on the top and the bottom. But what we're trying to do here, as you can see, is we're trying to leave a little bit of that black, you know, where his joints are and everything, and these areas inside of the, like the pelvis and the, you know, the rib cage and back here on his spine. And you can see all that. Okay. And so that's looking pretty good. Oh, just almost dropped him here. I'm brushing this paint on so thin here that it's actually almost dry. This part I'm touching up on top already feels like it's dry to the touch. My fingers aren't even sticking to it. But we want it to be kind of rough too. We don't want it to be smooth. You know, we want it to be. I was looking at the guy, you know, the skeletons in the movie, and they look really crusty. So that's good. We don't need a smooth paint job on this. Okay, so we've got them basically covered up here now. Just hitting a few of these little recess spots, making sure his skull's kind of evenly painted. Okay, as you can see there, he's looking pretty skeleton-like already. But you can see that that white is kind of too stark looking. It's too white. So what we do to fix that is I'm just going to switch over. I've got some tan here, just medium tan, and again, this is another of the Delta Ceramcoat colors, the regular craft paints. So I'm just gonna go over them now and start highlighting on this here and there with my brown. Put a little bit around his skull here, and down, you know, the side of his ribs, along his long parts of his bones here, maybe a little bit on the top of his feet, on the tops of the knees. You know, just kind of the high areas, the highlights that you'd want to see down here in his pelvis area. We'll kind of go around in the back now and just drag this over the areas here. A little bit more on his head here and up around the front of his face. Okay. And we're leaving, you know, a little bit of the white. There's just barely any paint on my brush, you know. I'm sure a lot of you guys out there are familiar with dry brushing and know what that's all about. Okay, so you can see, I'll hold this up here for you now. You can see now that what we've got looking like now is that he looks more like a little bit of aged kind of bone, not you know, fresh ivory looking bones like you'd normally see. Just get a bit more around in here, around his head. Okay, so that's looking a lot better now. Alright, so now what we're going to want to do is we've got a little bit of a black wash, and that's, I've got this mixed up really, really thin. So I'm going to get another paper towel here, and I'm going to put a little bit of water on that, because black, you don't want it to dry too fast and stay on there. All we're trying to do is highlight a few things here and there. So I'm going to switch to this smaller, fine brush, and I'm going to basically go around his joints and stuff and make sure that we get nice and black in there, and then just a little bit in the little lines that we have in between some of the bones and stuff, and then I'll go ahead and wipe that off. But I've got, like I said, barely any paint in the brush here. Doing the top of his feet and stuff like that, so that highlights his individual bones there. Just kind of go around him here and there and make sure he's. I'm gonna wipe this off on his leg here. We're just trying to leave a little bit. If you can see what I'm doing there, leaving a little bit in that little separation there where his two lower bones come together, and then up here around, like, say, the the joints, a little bit on the spine, and his knees, his ankles. Back down the spinal column because we kind of covered some of that up, and then we want to go in the low spots on his scapula bones back here, a little bit on his pelvis, arm bones up here. You can just, it doesn't take long to do this at all. You can go over it pretty quick. Wipe this off before it gets too dry or too soaked in there. Do his hand a little bit here. Highlight those bone segments. Just, what you do is you go back and do this, and then you make sure there's not like any heavy spots, and if there is, you can take a little bit of your take a little bit of our tan again, start kind of mixing some of these colors together and just kind of dab over it, and that will immediately sort of blend it back in. Pretty easy to do. Get this up in here. Making them look dirty and pretty crusty. Okay. Wipe all this down here. On the skull, you want it to look kind of blended in, not all one color, and you just want to highlight these little bone details, and then we're going to do his teeth a little bit here. Get rid of the excess. Yeah, in the movie, when you saw these guys up close, these guys definitely needed a trip to the dentist, man. Their teeth were in really bad shape. Okay, so we got kind of thick with the brown right there. It's easy to, being this is water-based, it's easy to take some of it back away whenever you want. And just kind of keep him a little bit more like that. This brown again. Now it's got a little bit of black mixed in with it, so that's kind of making another layer. Okay. Now you can see he's looking pretty crusty about now. So he's just about where I want him already. Now, what we do is finally here, we finish up with this sort of rust brown color here. It's raw sienna. And in the film, I noticed that they had these little spots on them here and there, like that was supposed to be kind of like dirt, I guess, that was stuck to them. So we're going to use that, and it was that exact shade, kind of that, light tan, orangish look. So I'm cleaning up my brush here real quick, and I'm just going to get nice and dry on the brush again with this, and I'm just going to highlight like around his skull a little bit here, just some spots on his joints and stuff, on his hands, and just wherever I feel like it. Drag it a little bit, put a little bit here on the top, a little bit here on the side, and maybe a little bit on the back, and then we're going to kind of just tamp it down a little bit. Dilute it just a little. We don't want it to look painted on. We want it to look like it's, you know, just soaked into the bone there, stuck on him. Kind of natural looking. Maybe a little bit on his lower jaw there. But they definitely had that color on them in the movie. You can see it real clear once they get up close. Put a little bit on his ribs, just a tiny little bit. Just highlighting it here and there. Make sure we have a little bit on his back. And we're making sure to, and you'll see it here in just a second when we show you the whole display all together, that these skeletons all look a little bit different. Like the, you know, the dirt's not all in the same place. They're not all exactly the same, the way they're painted. You know, I changed it up on each one. Let's put just a little bit more white back on his hand here. I got his hand a little bit too black. Just want to highlight the tops of his fingers here a little. Save those joints. Okay. Let's have a close look at him. You can see he's pretty nasty looking. Looks really good. He'll blend in really nice with the other guys. I'll go ahead and fix his hand, and then one little detail I'm going to do here is, let me clean this brush one more time. We got to paint in the little cracks on his, on the top of his head there. You know, you have the growth joints in your human skulls have a little growth joint. I forget what those are actually called, but they're there. The detail is there on these skulls, so we're going to put that in. This black paint is a little bit too runny for that, so I'm going to dump it out. And when I get towards the bottom here, it should be a little thicker. Hopefully I can make a nice little line here. And we'll do that for you. He's got one that goes basically across the top of his head here. So, whoops. I'll get that out of the way, getting kind of crowded here. So I'll just kind of do this. I'm just going to follow that little crack. That kind of goes into the side of his skull here, and then he's got one that kind of wraps around the back. See that. Now it's a little bit too bold, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a second to dry so it kind of stays there. A little bit of water on my brush and get rid of this black. We just want to blend this black in a little bit on the sides here where it's we just want to sort of highlight those recessed areas on his jaw and that little occipital or temple area of his skull, which kind of recessed there. Okay, and then I'm just going to tamp these down just a little on lines, just to try to get rid of the stuff on the high side. Okay, now we're going to brush a little bit of this brown real light so it sort of blends in. Back to my little bit of white here too. It's getting too brown on the top. All right. Okay, you can see that little crack in his head there is still there, but we've got it kind of blended in and more subtle looking now. It's got one little spot right here that keeps acting kind of weird. I think it's a little defect in the metal that keeps grabbing the paint and looking like a little brush stroke there, and we don't want to see that, so we'll get rid of that, blend that just a little bit there. Okay, I'm going to call him done, guys. Nothing fancy about this, right? I mean, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Just multiple layers, and these guys you can just paint them at random because they're just all messed up from being in the ground too long. So what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and reattach his hand on there. I'll get his shield and his sword glued on, and when I come back, you'll see the entire display with this guy put in place, and we'll show you the Jason figure, which he was the most important part. It took me a long time to paint him, and I'll explain what I did to paint him, rather than spending 3 or 4 hours painting him on the camera, like it's what it took me. It took me probably more like 4 or 5 hours to paint him completely, but I'll explain what I did with that, and then this will be a wrap, guys. We'll have the final reveal of the build here. I'll be coming back at some point after that and mounting it on a board or something, and I'll probably maybe show you that, how it turns out later. But for the most part, it'll be done. So I'll be right back, everyone. All right, everyone. Well, here we are at the end of the build. You can see we've got all of our figures mounted on the base now. The skeleton that you see to the far right is the last one that we were working on. Just finished painting him up. I mounted him on the base using a little bit of JB weld. It's been about 4 hours since I put him on there, and he's getting pretty solid now. He's on there for good. I've got all these guys mounted on here permanently. And as you can see, we've got 5 of the skeleton figures in this picture here, and as I mentioned, you know, the kit comes with 7 figures, so you can see that with 7 figures on here, it would have looked pretty cluttered. And the thing about, you know, when you add details to something, if you over detail it, you can't see any of the details. That's kind of a rule of thumb. So I felt like if we had 7 on here, this would have looked too crowded and too busy. And so I think we're pretty good right where we're at, and I'm really happy with it. I'll save those other 2 skeletons for some future project that we might need. They'll come in handy, but real happy with how this turned out. We'll get in a little bit closer for you here. I guess the first thing we'll show you is the Jason figure himself. I spent a lot of time working on this. As I was saying, I wanted to show you the painting process on this guy, but I shot for about an hour as I was doing my painting, and it turned out I wasn't happy with how it was going. It wasn't anything going wrong. It was mainly the colors I didn't like. The characters in this film, Jason and his crew, they're portrayed as sailors, and so they're out at sea all the time on an open ship, and they're Greek, so they have a fairly dark complexion from being tan and out in the sun and everything. And using just regular flesh tones, everything I tried, it was either looking too pink or too white. I just wasn't happy with it. I wanted these guys to look, or at least him to look a little bit more bronze looking, like, a person that's got a good tan. So what I finally did is I just mixed up my own colors. I have a couple of different colors going here. If you look really close, you can see where I've done some blending on the legs, on the muscle tone, and on the arms and everything, and a little bit on his face, around his nose, and the recesses where his eyes are, and the ears and everything. And so if I would have filmed all that, it would have been about 3 hours long, and it would have bored you guys to death. So I just, I figured I'd just talk about a little bit what I did. I used my automotive solvent-based paints on this instead of the craft acrylic paints. The reason why is that I knew I was going to be doing a lot of touching up and a lot of fixing, where you overpaint on edges and things like that. So I wanted something that was going to dry really, really fast. And also I have the solvent here to do blending and stuff. So like when I wanted to do the muscle tone and all that, I was able to, you know, dry brush with my solvents and everything and sort of blend everything together and then have it dry really fast. But we also painted on all that intricate decorations on his upper torso there on his battle armor, which I'm really happy with that. That took a long time to do. And then we worked on his face a lot here. The eyes are important on any figure. Now in this particular mold, the way that the eyes were cast onto it is that you normally paint around the line where the white part's supposed to be with a little bit of black on the edges, almost like an eyeliner to simulate the eyelashes and stuff. And when I did the basic white on the lines there, they just looked way too big. They looked like they were bulged out of his head. So I couldn't use the actual lines that were molded into this. I had to make them a little bit smaller by painting the skin part into where the eyes should be just a little bit to get them more looking like they were sort of squinted. That's the way I wanted him to look. I wanted him to look like he had a really intense stare, like he's fighting for his life here against this skeleton army. So I think I was able to get that. They do make some decals for eyes nowadays that look really great, but I didn't want to wait and order those in, so I just kind of plowed ahead on my own, and I'm not the best at doing it, but I don't think it looks too bad. As I said, I'm not an expert figure painter. This is like maybe the second human figure, or maybe third. I did the little Mad Max guy, and I did a Barnabas Collins figure a while back for a Halloween build, but this is like only maybe the third or fourth human figure I've ever painted, and he's pretty complex. But I'm pretty happy overall with how he came out. He's not perfect, but he's not too bad. We've got, like I said, the detail of his battle armor on there. I'll show you the back side of him here. It's turned out really great. Then up on the top here we got his shield. And I'm really pleased with the detail we got in on that. We got the little emblems put in there. Using those paper pieces like I talked about, we sealed those and then clear coated over it. Even down here on his leggings and his sort of gladiator boots, he's got like gold detail that's highlighted on that you can see. So we got all that in there. I'm real happy with that. Did a little bit of highlighting in his hair just to give it some texture so it didn't look all black, and the light's supposed to be hitting it, so that turned out pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with him. Now on the skeletons, as you can see, we've got these guys detailed out too with multiple layers, like we showed you the painting we did on that last figure. And these guys are all painted a little bit different. They're I didn't want them to look like they came off of an assembly line. They're supposed to be unique in their own way. And all these poses were the most tedious part of this build. Each one is doing something different, and yet they all have to be sort of focused on Jason. Their line of sight has to be looking right at him. So no matter what pose you put them in, you wanted to make sure that they were all looking at him. He's the target. He's what they're after. You can see we got a couple different guys down here. This guy laying down is kind of my favorite guy. It took me a while to get that just right, but I'm pretty happy with it. He's been knocked down and he's trying to get back up and get into the fight. And you got a guy with a spear here that's trying to get Jason from the other side. So Jason's got a lot to worry about in this scene. But on the spear here, they don't give you anything for that in the kit. It's just the tip, the deadly end of the spear here. Nothing on the other end. And what that is that's a stir stick, just a plastic stir stick I cut in half. I wound up drilling through this guy's hand all the way, and then I put a toothpick through there, and it's probably extending about this far into it, and I glued each end on it so I had something solid to mount it on. And then on this end, it was just an open end, and it didn't look right. So that little piece right there is a piece off of a plastic glue tip that comes with your tester's glue. I just cut that way down. And I also stuck a toothpick up in there and then used that and then glued that to that so it had something to hang on to. On spears, they had a sharp end on the other end, so because when they weren't using them, a lot of times they stuck them in the ground so they would just stand up. And so I think that looks pretty good. But we're going to just kind of pan around here and show you the detail on the landscape and the guys and everything. I'm really happy with these shields too. These emblems on these shields are straight out of the movie. I mean, if you look at the film, you'll see that the design on each one of them is exactly spot on. You got the kind of skull head down there on that guy with the Medusa, snakes coming out of it. You got the octopus guy over here. You got these kind of demon demon kind of guys on these. You got the lion's head on this one. If I get around here and show you. So they're all different, and it's just really, really cool. And you can see we did a lot of weathering here on the landscaping, added some rocks. We added our sort of dark color around the bottom of the base where you'd normally see a little bit of moss. Here's how our moss turned out that we did in the demo, showing you how to do this in the video where we were working on the base. We added a couple weeds in here and there, and I'm really, really happy with it. The rocks, like I said, are adding some realism to this. And if we look at this angle right here, this is kind of my favorite shot, looking kind of over Jason's shoulder here and straight down. The two skeletons on the base down there, that's really close to being spot on to the scene in the movie where they have a shot looking down from the platform, looking at these two skeletons that are just wailing away with their swords, you know, hacking away trying to get Jason. And I think they look pretty darn close to that. It's pretty awesome. I'm really, really, really digging this whole thing, and really glad I got the kit. You can see we got this guy kind of just coming straight at him, and again, you know, paying attention to making sure that they were all looking in the right direction. It was hard to get all these different poses. You know what I did, like I said, I started off with their feet first. You know, I determined where I wanted to have, how I wanted them to be, you know, their stance that I wanted them to have, so I would build from the feet up. And on the guy laying down, I basically started off with just his two legs and how I wanted to have him crossed and everything, and making sure that his feet were going to be laying on the ground, you know, touching the ground and not sticking up and looking kind of weird. So I try to get him to look where he's lifting his hand off the ground there. He's like just starting to get back up after he's been knocked down. And then the way we've got this guy set up, sort of crouched, and you know, putting everything he has into, you know, trying to jab him with the spear there. Just kind of go around and look at their detail on their faces here a little bit for you. Whoops, my darn backdrop keeps wanting to tip over on me. I just got this sitting here so you didn't see all the clutter in the background. I'm actually going to order a nice print to put behind this against the wall when I have this on display of some Greek ruins. I think I found a pretty cool one of Zeus's temple that's about 18 inches high by 24 inches wide, so it'll look really great. A little bit of clouds and, you know, kind of a nice sky background behind it, and I think that'll look really cool. It'll look like it came right out of the movie, and that'll kind of spruce this up a little bit too. But we're gonna mount this on a wooden base, you know, a nice, hopefully I'll find a nice like black, either one. They have these nice ones that are at Lowe's that are covered in like a black formica that I think would look really good. They have sort of a satin black, almost a really smooth finish on it. And I'll mount this down on top of it. I'll epoxy glue it down on there. The one corner right here is sort of bowed up just a tiny little bit, but that's not a problem. When I epoxy that down, I'll put a little bit of weight there and get it all down nice and flush. And this kit comes with a nice nameplate that says Jason and the Argonauts, but you know, there's no good place to put it on the actual scene here without it looking way out of place. You know, I thought about maybe like right here, but it just, to me, it would take away from the realism of the whole thing. So we'll mount it on the flat part of the you know, the base here right on the front, and I think that'll look pretty good. It's pretty thin, so I think it'll fit right on that front edge without sticking up. But I'll do that a little bit later. So I really enjoyed working on this. I just want to say thanks to everybody for the comments all the way through the build series and the tips about working with some of this stuff. Some of it I used, and it worked out really great. A lot of you guys have experience with this stuff out there, and I appreciate the feedback and comments, you know, encouraging us to get this thing done and everything. Put a lot of work into it, but real happy with the results. I'm super glad I got this kit. Like I said, it's really rare. They still sell the Jason figure himself over at Monsters in Motion, but as far as I know, this kit itself with the, you know, the base and everything is long out of production. So I was just really happy to be in the right place at the right time and be able to get it. It's one of my all-time favorite scenes, and it's fantastic. Now, I've actually ordered another kit in here, following along the same lines. It's the Talos figure from the same movie, Jason and the Argonauts. And those of you who are fans of the film will know exactly who Talos is. He was a giant, like 80 or 100 foot tall guy made out of bronze, sort of a warrior looking guy, gladiator sort of looking guy. And he was guarding the riches of the gods that were in this sort of temple they landed on this island to try to find food and water, and Jason warned the crew when they were exploring not to take anything except food and water, that the gods had told them that's all they could do. Well, two of the crewmen, I think Hercules was one of them, they found this, you know, temple with Talos, sort of kneeling on the top of it, and they thought he was just a bronze statue. And when they tried to take something out of there, he came to life and basically attacked, and the scene that the kit that we're getting depicts is the scene where they're in the ship and they're trying to get away. There's a narrow entrance in between two big rocks into a sort of a lagoon by the island, and Talos takes a stance like right between the two rocks, and they're trying to go by underneath him, and it's just before he starts reaching down and he picks up the ship and wrecks the ship and dumps all the guys out and everything. So it's a really cool scene. In the kit, you're supposed to add your own water, so I'm going to finally get a chance to do realistic water effects using some silicone or something, so I'll probably ask some questions from some of you guys out there that have done that before. I've never done that either, and I want it to look good. It's not supposed to be really rough water. It's supposed to be fairly just calm, rolling water with a little bit of water stirred up around where the oars are coming out of the boat, but that's about it. So we'll get that figured out, but it's going to be a lot of fun painting the Talos figure because he looks sort of a worn out bronze with a lot of like green corrosion all over him that you see from bronze statues that are sitting outside for a long time. So it's going to be a lot of fun doing the paint detailing on him. And then the boat, or I shouldn't call it a boat, the ship, the Argo, I think the name of it is. It has the detail of all the oars sticking out and the sail and everything, so that'll be really cool. I'm really looking forward to that. Probably won't get to that one right away. It'll be a couple of weeks. What the plan is here is we're going to come back probably starting next week and get back to the Battle in the Matara Nebula diorama. I've got everything gathered up for that, so we can move forward on that now, and I know you guys have been wanting to see more on that one, so we'll do that. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this build series we've been doing lately on these figures. I've been having a blast with this, guys. A nice little change of pace, and I'm really happy with the results here. Like I said, put a lot into it, but I'm going to have this displayed in my collection and put it in with the Kraken and the Medusa, and maybe we'll add a few others later on down the road of some of my favorites. But like I said, hope you enjoyed it. So again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate everything you guys contribute to the channel as well, your comments and everything, so keep them coming. And we'll be back with more entertaining builds for you in the future, guys. Until we see you next time, long live Jason and the Argonauts, and take care out there. Happy modeling, everyone.